Well, this is the video I think most of you have been waiting for. So I'm going to show you how I took this photo and created this photo. Let's just get rid of that information and created that photo. Along the way, I'll give you an idea on how you can create your own textures for using this. I actually don't remember where I got this one from, to be honest, but it doesn't matter. I'll show you how you can create them. I'll give you an idea of where you can go to actually find a course on doing this kind of image. I have to say right from the outset that this photo, let's go have a look at the original photo, is not the ideal one for creating what I did. So I was really pleased that it actually worked out quite well. So this was the photo as supplied by Lou. Just fixed the white balance to get to as shot, did auto settings on it. We adjusted the exposure because it just feels a little bit too bright, so we'll just go through a bit of put my teeth in, a little bit of toning, and then I cropped it, added a bit of texture to it. This is not a texture for the background, this is adding more detail into the image. I put a vignette on it, tried this. So this is all me trying things out. So I tried the vignette, didn't like that, undid it, and so I just tried a lot of different things to come up with the photo. And one of the things that I've been playing with recently is to play around with calibration in here, which is playing around with the camera calibration. So I was adjusting the green value in here just to see if I could, get a little bit more interest into the photo. Played around with some shadows, so I just pushed some shadows into the magenta, and then did some more crop adjusting. Now you notice I've actually cropped off the tail here, which is normally not a good thing to do. Yeah, it doesn't actually matter because in the finished photo I get rid of most of the tail anyway. At this point I fired this over into Photoshop, so let's have a look at Photoshop. This is the image, and my first thought for this photo was to put a texture on top of it. That was the original idea. And to do that, all I did was I have my textures in a library. So these are all my textures that I've currently got. Some of these I've created, some of these I've got from somewhere else and I can't remember where. This might be one I got from somewhere else, but it doesn't matter, it's the idea that counts. And then it's just a question of dragging it into the image and resizing it, and we don't have to worry too much about whether we maintain the aspect ratio of the texture. We're just going to put it in there and we'll accept it. Next thing we need to do is I'm just going to switch that off, and I'm just going to go to select subject. And this will do a fairly good job at picking the subject up. That's going to be good enough for what we want. So then I switch my layer back on and we'll add a mask to it. And I need to invert that mask because I want to see the line and not subtract it. I'm just going to rasterize. At the moment we've got a link here, so I'm just going to rasterize this layer. There we go. And then we are going to select a brush and a brush with a nice soft edge, so bring the hardness down to 0, and what we're going to do is actually just start painting in, whoops, not on the image, we're going to paint on the mask. I'm going to drop my flow down to about 23%, that's nice, and then we're just going to start painting in here just to reveal some of the detail. When you're doing an animal like this, you really do need to see what the animal is standing on. Otherwise it just looks like it's floating. And so all we're doing here is we're just softening the image It makes it a bit bigger. I just don't want that quite so bright, so sharp in there. And all I'm doing is I'm just going around, just blending this in really. It doesn't matter if you go over the body of the animal. It doesn't matter in the slightest. In actual fact, that actually works to your advantage if you do that. So let's just get some more detail back up here. Now fur is always going to be a problem, right? Fur is always a problem. It's hard to pick fur out from a background, particularly one that's as complicated as this. So I just went round with this in here. Let's push my flow right up a bit, and let's just work on the body. And so we're just going around on here, and then if you do decide you go too far, you just invert the brush to paint on black. And so we're going to go around like this. That's one way. Now I think the way I did this from memory is I actually didn't start off that way. What I did was just delete that mask. And we'll put a new mask on here. And I'm just going to pull my opacity down so I can see where the lion is. And then with a black brush, I'm just going to start painting in here and so see where the lion is. Once I've got a starting point, then I can push my opacity up. And let's just drop that flow down. And then we can, let's bring it down even more than that actually. And we can just start painting in here with a nice soft brush. Bring it right down. And it's just a question of going round and exposing the animal underneath. As I say, it's important that we do bring out the ground that the animal is standing on. And so, you know, this is not a terribly difficult process. And so that's what that looks like. Now, like I said, we have a problem with some of the fur. So how do we deal with the fur? Well, one thing that we can do is, I have a whole load of brushes in here. And one of these is, let me see if I can find it, is a hair, something called a hairbrush, no pun intended. And what happens with this hairbrush is that as I paint, notice how we're getting this angular, this change of direction effect, which actually works in the direction in which I'm brushing. If I change the direction in which I'm brushing, then it changes the direction of this hair. So let's just undo this. And so with this hairbrush, let's just make this a bit smaller. All I then just started to do was just paint in here, just to expose some of the background in a more sort of semi-natural looking way. And it's just a question of click, paint, click, paint. And if we look at the mask, we can see there where I've just done that kind of effect. So let's get rid of this layer. Let's go back to the mask that I actually used, or the texture I actually used, and it came out looking like that. Now there's a couple of things about this which I don't like. I don't like the blue tones it's got in here. So all I did on this one was I added a hue and saturation layer, and I went into the blues and I shifted the hue by using this slider just to shift the hue up to a colour which seemed more harmonious. I then played around with the lightness and the saturation. So if we brought the lightness back to 0, then it looks a little bit on the muddy side maybe. So just by pushing the lightness up and pushing the saturation up, it just got a little bit more interest in there. So I'll just undo those. That's right, keep you. The next thing I decided was that it was perhaps a little bit on the bright side, so we'll just switch on a brightness and contrast layer. So with this, we just pulled the brightness down, and then the last thing I felt, oh, both of these were clipped, by the way, so we need to clip these to the texture layer. So with this, we just brought the brightness down a little bit. We've changed the hue of the blue area. Now I just felt that we've got this section around here, just highlight it, which is a little bit brighter than the rest of the photos. So all I did was I added a brightness layer. We pulled the brightness down, and I just masked out everything except for that area, just to better to tone it in. And that's all I did. It's not a difficult thing to do. The hard part is finding the texture. So how do we find a texture? Well, we can either go and photograph something and turn it into a texture. Let me just pause this and I'll just load up a photo and I'll show you what I mean. So here's the photo loaded into Photoshop. This is just a rock with different coloured pigments. I took this in Norfolk last year. And to turn this into a texture, what I would do is I would go into blur, Gaussian blur, use quite a hefty radius just to blur a lot of the detail. And then I might use the smudge tool with a brush. I've got some cloud brushes. I created these for use in some of the photos that I've created. These are just photos of clouds that I've taken and I've converted into a brush. And then we can use shape dynamics and what have you to change the size of the brush as we're brushing things. And then it's just a question of just brushing in here and stretching stuff around. Now this is not a quick process, so I'm going to speed up the video here so we can then maybe see what the finished result looks like. Okay, so you can see now that when we did the blur it looked like that, and now after I've smudged it, it looks like this, and you can go on ad infinitum. Now I made a mistake on this demonstration because what I should have done is I should have resized the photo first, because otherwise the smudge tool on a high resolution image, which this is, does take quite a while to run. Then the other thing we might do on this one is to put on a hue and saturation layer, and then we can start playing around with the reds, and we might change the hue on the reds to take it into a different direction. We can change the lightness to pull the the lightness down, push the saturation up. Let's go into the yellows. We can do the same thing here, and we can start doing some really quite funky stuff on your texture. So that's one way. You can start off with a photo of something mundane, maybe a door or something like that, which is got rust on it. Anything like that would work. So that's one way. The other way of doing it is, if we just shut this down. So all we do is we create a new document. I've created this one at 1920 by 1080. I'm going to choose a brush, and then we'll choose a cloud brush in here. So these are my cloud brushes that I've created from my own photos. There'll be another video on showing you how to create brushes. That's something for another time. And then what I need to do is I need to go into my brush settings, which are up here. That's this icon just there. And we're going to change some of these settings in here. So I'm going to change my shape dynamics. We'll change the size jitter, and we'll change the angle jitter. And what the size and angle does is, let's just collapse that, is as I paint in here, it changes every time I click and paint, it changes the angle of the brush, and it also changes the size of it. So let's undo this. We're also going to do color dynamics. Let's look at the color dynamics. And what we can do now is change the hue jitter. We can also change saturation and the brightness. Probably don't want the brightness to go up quite so high, so let's just minimize that. And now as we paint, I probably don't want to change the hue quite as much as this. But all I'm doing is I'm clicking and just dragging the brush, and we can change to a different cloud. So let's go to, I don't know, say this one. I need to make this one a bit smaller because I think it's quite big. And again, we will change the shape dynamics. Let's change the size. Probably won't do this one quite so much. We'll change the angle, maybe not do that one quite so much. Let's do color dynamics. We won't change the hue or the saturation and the brightness. And now we just start dragging this around. And you can just build up a texture like this. Now, once you've done that, what we can then do is go back into the smudge tool, and we'll start dragging this around. And this is the difference as if you use a small image. It is much faster to do this smudging, and we can just start dragging this around. And so on. And then we can add a hue and saturation layer on top of it, and we can start playing around with and change the colors of this. So we might want to change the magentas. Let's push the saturation up, bring the brightness down. Let's choose another, go into another color, maybe that one. Let's just start adjusting this. We could add another layer on top of this. We can choose a selective color, and we can change the reds in here, so we can put more cyan into the reds, put more green into them, and we can start really playing around with these colors and pushing them in directions they don't really want to be going. Let's put some red into the blues. Let's put some yellow into let's put some more blue into it, and maybe we can put some magenta in there. So we can start playing around with these colors to build up a texture. And that's the other way that you can create your own textures to use on your own photos. Now, of course, you don't have to you put a texture on animals. You can put them on birds. You can put them on people if you want to. You could put them on things. So you might, I don't know, maybe a car or something like that. So there's lots of uses that you can do with this. But the secret behind it is to make sure that you don't accurately mask out your subject. Make sure that your texture does actually blend into the animal, because otherwise it just looks like it's floating, and you don't want a floating animal there.